now I want to take a look at the future. Specifically, what we can expect probably in the next 10, 15 years from Japan. Everyone knows that the bullet train or Shinkansen in Japan, incredible technology, world-class form of travel. I mean, as in some ways riding Grand Class, which is their first class on the Shinkansen, equivalent to first class on an international airliner, commercial airliner. Well, Japan's looking at all of that, and they're looking at their, 240, 300 kilometer per hour speeds that they're able to pull off with the Shinkansen. And they took a look at all that, and the boffins at Japan Railways said, yeah, you know what, we can do better. And they are. Let's take a look at this. This is from Looking For. Japan's $85 billion Maglev train, soon to be on track. Let's play the tape.
Ever since opening the world's first true high-speed rail back in 1964, Japan has been ahead of the pack when it comes to innovative transportation and blistering speed. Now, more than half a century later, it's poised to stun the world all over again. The historic Tokaido Shinkansen, the very line which first introduced us to the term bullet train, is undergoing a major expansion. The expansion will initially run from Tokyo to Nagoya, then later on all the way from Tokyo to Osaka.
That is the ultimate proving ground for any sort of, the ultimate test for any sort of high-speed bullet train in Japan has always been, how fast can we get from the capital city of Japan to the second biggest city in Japan, from Tokyo to Osaka? That's always been the big challenge, almost like their version of the runner's 4-minute mile.
And it will cover the roughly 500-kilometer distance in less than half the time of the original high-speed train, making Japan once again the home of the world's fastest commercial train.
Incredible.
In this episode of Looking For, we'll be taking an in-depth look at this groundbreaking development in transportation. We'll study the almost magician-like technology that allows the train to move so fast, so reliably. We'll gather the available evidence to see what this new rail line will look like in practice and how it will impact Japanese society. And we'll even try to take a step aboard and get a sense of what it will be like to travel 500 kilometers per hour on a cozy passenger train.
I mean, just think of that, chat. 500 kilometers per hour. Hang on a minute. We've got to translate that into imperial measurements. Hang on. Let's see. 500 kmh to miles per hour. That is over just over 310 miles per hour. 310 miles per hour on a train. That is just blisteringly tear your face off quick.
Welcome, friends, to Chuo Shinkansen. Although it represents the cutting edge of transportation technology today, the Chuo Shinkansen project has been in the works since the early 1970s. After the success of the initial 1964 line, Japan began looking at what were then called next-generation transport methods. This led to the development of a technology that sounds like something from a comic book: superconducting magnetic levitation. While other countries
it sounds like the stuff of science fiction.
Were also working on similar projects at the time, most notably West Germany and the US, Japan was the first to put the technology into a physical train and begin conducting tests. In 1979, Japan's ML500 train hit a staggering 517 kilometers per hour on the Miyazaki test track, by far the world record at the time. The reason...
Again, over 300 miles per hour with that little prototype there.
For Japan's dominance during this period came down to the fact that its trains weren't just magnetic, they were also superconducting. In simple terms, this means that while everyone else was just using room temperature magnets, Japan was using cooled magnets, cooled to negative 269 degrees Celsius to be precise.
So that's the key.
Thanks to a phenomenon discovered in the 1930s called the Meissner effect,
a phenomenon where a superconductor actively expels magnetic fields from its interior as it transitions from a normal state to a superconducting state. And I guess all of that comes from supercooling the magnet.
Careful supercooling, achieved with the use of liquid helium, induces currents
So
in
that's
coils
how they
along
do
the
it.
guideway that create repulsive lift and lateral stability. This
I have to wonder from an investor's perspective what that would do for helium prices, especially for liquid helium, because it's not easy to get that sort of thing in liquid form and then put it in probably a pressurized container and then install it on a maglev train. That has to be still a fairly expensive process.
allows the train to eventually float a full 10 centimeters above the track at speed, much higher than what can be achieved with regular electromagnetic suspension. This increased levitation isn't only amazing, it also enables the train to travel even faster. But in the beginning,
It practically levitates, which reduces friction, which allows it to go at these blisteringly fast speeds almost effortlessly. And there's the key with the sciencey bits of reducing friction. That's one of the big keys to getting these things to go so fast is reducing friction.
this hyper-futuristic technology was confined strictly to the laboratory. Even still, Japan emerged in the mid-20th century as the world's leader in high-speed electric train travel. The Tokaido Shinkansen, which translates to New Main Line East Coast Route, debuted in 1964 and carried passengers at 210 kilometers per hour. Many of these passengers were still
Impressive
discovering the
even back then.
Beatles for the first time and driving cars that maxed out at 120 or 130. So, needless to say, this was considered extremely fast at the time.
Yeah.
But, as I mentioned earlier, Japan was clearly not content to rest on its laurels. Researchers continued to work on increasing train speeds even as the rest of the world was marveling at the Tokaido Shinkansen. Over the next several decades, Shinkansen trains accelerated further and further, eventually reaching peak speeds of 320 kilometers an hour by the early 2010s. But surprisingly, this is not currently the world's fastest commercial railway. Today, several trains in China well exceed any in Japan, most notably the CR450, designed to run as fast as 400 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, designed to do that. I doubt they can actually get that fast. As we've seen, they don't take care of their shit.
Japan is now also tied for second place with France, whose TGV line reached 320 kph not long after Shinkansen first did.
And the French barely take care of their shit.
Cutting-edge high-speed rail is a point of strong national pride for the Japanese. Magnetic levitation, or Maglev for short, was simultaneously developed by several countries throughout the 20th century, and today is used in various rail lines across Asia and some parts of Europe. What separates Japan is its unique, decades-long focus on superconducting maglev, or SC maglev for short. As described earlier, this supercooling technique relying on the Meissner effect has been the brainchild of multiple generations of Japanese engineers. It's undergone numerous tests throughout the years, often setting records in the process, although the technology has never been implemented in a commercial train. After the record-breaking speed of 517 kilometers an hour set back in 1979, Japan dove into a long period of research and development, focusing on key factors like
potential.
superconducting coil design, cryogenic cooling systems, and aerodynamics. Finally, in 1997, a prototype train called the MLX-01 achieved 531 kilometers per hour.
The design of the MLX-01, those of you who are especially British rail enthusiasts, I can't help but notice somewhat of a resemblance to the old Mallard steam locomotive, which if any of you, I would say just Google it, and you'll see what I mean. A very aerodynamic steam locomotive, a very beautiful design too. Just a true testament to British engineering. But yeah, I see a bit of a resemblance. The MLX-01 is like a highly futuristic version of the Mallard.
On the Yamanashi Maglev test line. Less than 2 years later, that same prototype reached 552 kph. Then in December 2003,
keeps
the
outdoing itself.
MLX-01 hit 581, setting the world record for all trains.
And I recognize this photograph. I believe you can actually step inside. I think the MLX-01 has since been retired, but you can actually, like, step inside and take a look at it. It's in a museum now, and deservedly so. I mean, it's an incredible landmark in train engineering.
And most recently, in April 2015, the successor of the MLX-01, called the L0, reached 590. Then just a week later, 603. Now, over a decade since, this record still stands.
It keeps going faster
and it's worth
faster.
mentioning, these were manned tests, meaning
Technological marvel, absolutely.
49 engineers went for the ride of their lives. To put it into perspective, 600 kilometers an hour is roughly half the speed of sound.
Mach 0.5. This train is capable of going Mach 0.5. That's, I mean, we think of aeroplanes these days, especially things like fighter jets, or, you know, the Concorde before it was retired, in terms of, yeah, you know, you've got capable of cruising speeds of like Mach 1, but to get Mach 0.5 out of a train, out of something that is designed to run on the ground, on rails, that's incredible. I mean, it's just mind-blowing how fast this thing can go.
The siren on an ambulance driving in the opposite direction would theoretically dip 2 full octaves as it passed by. But in reality, it would pass by far too quickly to even make out. In fact, nothing anywhere near the tracks could be seen clearly from out the windows. Only buildings more than 100 meters away would even be recognizable.
Everything would
Even
be
large
a blur.
structures or mountains a full kilometer in the distance would appear and pass by within the span of just 12 seconds.
I have to wonder, then, what it would be like for one to be in one of these prototypes and passing by Mount Fuji. Because the Tokyo to Osaka line of the Tokaido Shinkansen, I mean, you're already going by really fast to where a lot of things are just a blur, but you're still able to make out Mount Fuji in the distance. I have to wonder if these speeds at Mach 0.5, if even Mount Fuji would just start to look like a blur. How am I supposed to get jump scared by a yokai out the window now? They'd have to be a really fast yokai with a lot of grip.
If sustained, the speed Japanese train engineers were traveling would get them from London to Paris in just 45 minutes, covering
Incredible.
the length of 2 Boeing 747s every second.
You can't even get that with going through the Channel Tunnel. And I don't even think you can get that with aeroplane travel from, say, you know, Heathrow to De Gaulle.
But frustratingly, this incredibly speedy technology has still never been implemented in any real train. Only prototypes under test conditions. But that is all about to change. The Central Japan Railway Company first announced its intention to raise funding for Chuo Shinkansen, the world's first superconducting maglev railway, all the way back in December 2007. JR Central projected that
Before the dark times, before the great financial crisis and the big crash,
the total cost to be 5.1 trillion yen. In today's US dollars, about 45 to 50 billion. The company also declared it would not be relying on government financing for the project. Then, in 2011, JR Central adjusted their estimates to 9 trillion yen, the equivalent of roughly 85 billion US dollars in today's money. There are several reasons why the
Still a lot
project
of
was
money.
expected to be so expensive. One reason was the extraordinary amount of new tunnels that would have to be constructed. Chuo Shinkansen would require far more tunnels than any previous Japanese rail project. A full 86% of the 285-kilometer journey from Tokyo to Nagoya would take place inside tunnels, with some tunnels in alpine regions stretching as long as 25 kilometers.
it kind of makes sense, and I'll probably get into this in the video, that so much of it would be via tunnels. Exposed to the elements like that, I think makes it a lot harder to keep the temperature stabilized for those magnets. Because again, you're talking about having to super cool them in order to get everything to work. If you're able to do that, if you're able to have it traveling through a tunnel, makes that job a whole lot easier versus having everything exposed to the elements. And I mean, can you imagine trying to super cool magnets in the middle of a Japanese summer that only gets hotter the further southwest that you travel, towards Osaka, towards Fukuoka, towards Okinawa? It just gets hotter and hotter. And summers in Japan, incredibly hot and humid. So yeah, there's a chance that equipment like that could break quite easily, especially if it's still such a young technology, a technology that's still quite in its infancy.
Even when the additional track leading to Osaka is added, the full Chuo Shinkansen line will still be 80% tunnel. In other words, not visible at all to the surface. There are quite a few reasons why these extensive tunnels are necessary. One, which actually seems rather obvious once you think about it, is that the railway line has to be relatively straight. To be precise, the minimum curve radius, in other words, the tightest possible turn allowed on the track, will be 8,000 meters, among the widest to ever be used on a commercial railway. The trains simply can't wind through dense urban landscape or curve around mountains. It has to blast straight through them. That means in most cases, it will have to pass stealthily underneath. Sending the 500-kilometer-an-hour bullet train,
in other words, it can't have any sharp turns. It's got to be very wide turns. Wind turns are absolutely required. But the key to making all of this work, especially with Maglev, is being able to go in a straight line. Drifting trains would be interesting. It would be interesting, possibly amusing to see from the outside. I don't know if I want to be riding one. That sounds like that would be horrifying.
Underground also protects it from weather, offers better earthquake resilience, and, believe it or not, ends up being more affordable when you stack it up against what it would cost to acquire land in the densely populated region where the train is set to run.
Yeah.
Yet another, more surprising reason for putting the train underground is the noise. And despite what you might at first...
Yeah. I mean, you hit Mach 1, you're going to create a sonic boom. But even Mach 0.5, that is going to be a really loud train.
First think, this doesn't refer to engine noise. The L0 series trains are 100% electric. They essentially fly along magnets with minimal friction, so even the rails themselves are eerily quiet. In fact, riding on the train will be as stable and as silent as driving on the highway in a Tesla. However, if you're standing outside the train when it goes by, it's a very different story. The full train would conceivably weigh something like 300 metric tons.
I think the blast of air from that thing going by would probably be enough to knock people off their feet.
When it plows through the air at 500 kilometers an hour, the pressure waves are enormous.
Yeah.
In fact, tests have revealed the pressure blasts are loud enough to potentially cause hearing damage, not to mention being extremely startling for pedestrians.
Yes.
Standing near the tracks as the train ripped by, you'd feel a slap of air ruffling your clothes, and it would sound like a low-flying jet, perhaps 95 to 100 decibels.
Yeah, you would want to, at the very least, have some sort of hearing protection, like some sort of, the, I don't know what they call them, streamer brain, shit. Not earmuffs, but actual, like, industrial-grade hearing protection. You know what I mean, chat.
One journalist who participated in an early test ride in 2013 wrote a simple headline: Maglev train offers smooth ride inside, deafening noise outside. JR Central has spent years assessing...
Maglev, welcome in. Good to see you. How are you? Oh, by the way, Maglev, I'm glad you showed up. Got somebody here in chat, Damien Demore, who I think wanted to touch base with you about something. I think you're both in my server, so if it's all right with you, I think Damien would like to reach out, maybe DM you about something. I think he wanted to help you with a model redesign or something like that. I can't quite remember, but yeah. You two feel free to talk amongst yourselves. But good to see you. How are you?
Noise factor. The company claims, quite plausibly, that the L0 trains are quieter
Oh, we've chatted a bit. Oh, good. I'm glad you're both connected.
than their predecessors. But nevertheless, the trains will have to hit their max speeds underground, far away.
Good. How are you? Doing all right. We are looking at the future here. We are looking at what we can expect to see, possibly in the next 10, maybe 15 years, from Japan replacing the Shinkansen with Maglev trains that can go over 500 kilometers per hour, but well over 300 miles per hour. About Mach 0.5. It's been a fascinating journey.
From earshot. The original construction timeline was set in 2013, with plans to complete the initial Tokyo to Nagoya section by 2027. Even at this,
I don't think that's going to happen. Spoiler alert, chat. I don't think that we're going to make it to that point. The Japanese are good. They're good. They're not that good. Even they have their limitations.
early stage, the additional Osaka section wasn't expected to be finished until 2045.
Jesus.
However, in 2016, the Shinzo Abe government offered about 3 trillion yen in long-term, ultra-low interest loans. The deal seemingly caused JR Central to quickly reconsider its initial vow to not use government financing. It also allowed the Osaka completion date to be moved from 2045 to 2037. In 2015, work began. Specifically, tunneling began. First, a 7-kilometer tunnel spanning the Yamanashi and Shizuoka prefectures, and then in December, one of the 25-kilometer megatunnels, which will be Japan's deepest tunnel at 1,300 meters below ground.
That thing is incredible.
The following year, construction was started on a maglev station in the special ward of Shinagawa in Tokyo.
Excellent. Currently building an unregistered firearm legally. That's good. It's important to do that sort of thing legally. Glad to have some yapping in my ear while I work. Well, happy to do the yapping.
In 2021, the project had its first fatal accident when a rock collapse struck 2 male workers who were inspecting bedrock during the construction of a tunnel in Nagasagawa City.
Unfortunately, chat, this sort of thing has happened before with workers. It's important to distinguish they've not had any passenger deaths with the operation of the Shinkansen, but the building of the lines themselves have not been without tragedy, especially if you look into the history of building of the Shinkansen tunnel from, I forget what it was, but connecting the rest of Japan to Hokkaido prefecture. That Hokkaido prefecture is separate from the rest of Japan. There's water even separating them. And so they had to tunnel under that. It was almost like trying to build the Channel Tunnel between Britain and France. And it was a long process, and it was a dangerous one. And a lot of good men lost their lives in that process. But their sacrifice was not in vain, because now they've got Shinkansen service that goes from, it goes from Osaka and, far western parts of Japan all the way up towards Hokkaido. And it hasn't quite made it to Sapporo, the big city in Hokkaido prefecture yet. But there's plans to build out the Shinkansen railway lines to where they eventually do reach Sapporo. Construction can be dangerous indeed. Having done work in the civil service for government agencies where construction infrastructure were bread and butter for these particular departments, I can say, that's why there's just an absolute obsession with safety. Because although there are plaques and murals and memorials constructed, especially in some of these offices, to honor those who lost their lives, these agencies, they take no pleasure in having to put yet another name on those memorials. And so the longer they can go without having to put one of those names on, the better.
One of the workers was killed, while the other survived with a broken leg. This unwelcome news came in the ongoing midst of another controversy, one that has now plagued the project for years. This is the issue of the Shizuoka Prefecture, which opposes the tunnel which is set to run through the southern Alps. The tunnel is designed to have an 8.9-kilometer Shizuoka section, but the prefecture has continually refused to grant permission for it. The ostensible concern is water flow. The tunnel cuts through the Oi River watershed, and some are concerned the tunnel will divert water from the river's natural flow, potentially disrupting agriculture, industry, and even municipal water supply.
I mean, I understand their concerns, they're right to bring them up, but the question is, would it actually do that? That's the big question. It's one thing to raise the concerns, there's another thing to provide an answer.
In April 2020, an expert panel was assembled to take a look at the potential environmental implications of the tunnel. They concluded the impact of the river's underground basins would be small, but the report was subsequently criticized by the Shizuoka government as, quote, insufficient and hasty. This more or less gives you an idea of the nature of the ongoing dispute. With no resolution in sight, JR Central is yet to make any official alterations to the master schedule, but have acknowledged that the delays in Shizuoka pose a serious threat to the current 2027 completion date of the Tokyo-Nagoya section.
I don't think they're going to make that deadline. I have my doubts.
Such challenges are perhaps to be expected during construction. But what about the roughly 66 million people who live in cities Chuo Shinkansen will service, anxiously awaiting the opportunity to travel on the world's fastest train? Examined in closer detail, the complete...
I mean, if they wanted to avoid that watershed, I suppose they could just dig a little bit deeper and go under it. Maybe. I mean, it's easier said than done, but it's an idea nevertheless.
Railway will feature 9 total stations. Travelers boarding Chuo Shinkansen at the Shinagawa station in Tokyo, either from within the city or from a connecting train, will encounter 4 stops before reaching Nagoya. But even so, the journey will take less than 1 hour. Normally, even on the original high-speed...
That is incredible. Less than 1 hour to go from Shinagawa in Tokyo to Nagoya Station. That, I mean, normally it would take you just 90 minutes to get from, say, Tokyo Station to Yokohama, and that's taking a lot of slow trains. Covering that much distance in less than an hour, that is just mind-boggling.
Tokaido Shinkansen, this is a nearly 1 hour 30 minutes trip. Given that so much of the journey will take place in long underground tunnels, the ride might feel almost like teleporting. And it will really feel like teleporting if you book the express service, which blasts right past the 4 intermediary stations and goes from Tokyo full speed straight to Nagoya. This journey, a journey of perhaps 270 kilometers, will be over in just 40 minutes. Those who have experienced test rides have described the onboard sensation as similar to that of an airplane at cruising altitude. Given that the train is technically 10 centimeters above the base of the rails, this makes sense. Within 3 minutes of departing the station on the express line, the train will have gradually and gently accelerated all the way to 500 kilometers per hour. The relatively low volume inside the cabin will allow for easy conversation. Cabin pressure will automatically adjust upon tunnel entry to maintain the tranquility of the onboard environment and prevent unwanted effects like popping ears. JR Central has released only partial mock-ups, but the interiors of the test trains give an impression of what the cabins will look like. Reclining seats will be arranged 2 by 2.
Yeah, it seems like they've just sort of repurposed existing interiors from previous generations of Shinkansen, which is fine. I mean, it works. It's a working model. So, I mean, I might as well go with what works for now, not reinvent the wheel. You can always do your Kaizen continuous improvements later.
Similar to an airplane economy, but wider and with more legroom. Windows will be rectangular and elongated, prioritizing lighting and interior ambience.
It looks like an airline, yeah. No, very much modeled after what you get with an airline.
After all, the world outside will be a mostly unrecognizable blur anyway. JR Central has even experimented with testing OLED information panels on the windows themselves, giving passengers route data or scenery overlays. so it's possible Chuo Shinkansen will include such a feature. Vendors and trolley amenities are also expected, though not yet confirmed. In general, the minimalist design appears to focus on almost cocooning passengers in a quiet and mellow space, totally and remarkably different from the reality of what's happening outside the train.
A quiet, mellow space. That sounds heavenly.
What will it feel like to travel 500 kilometers an hour on a train? In short, the answer might be not a whole lot different from traveling any other speed on a train.
I mean, they're talking about highly stabilized trains and coaches here that you're not exposed to the elements, so you're not going to feel like you're having your face ripped off, which, if you stick your head out the window or something like that, that would be what it feels like. But yeah, inside, you probably wouldn't notice.
The only shock to the system will be how abruptly you arrive somewhere else, on the other end of the country. And speaking of that country, how might traveling so comfortably and easily at such speed affect Japan as a whole? In terms of infrastructure, the immediate impact will automatically be somewhat visible. As previously mentioned, most of the railway will be underground. Even many of the stations along the route will, in essence, be expansions to existing stations, facilitating frequent connections with other trains and transport in Japan's famously excellent public transportation system. Chuo Shinkansen will appear almost behind the scenes, a deep artery running below the visible surface of the country. However, that artery will likely facilitate various transformations that will be anything but invisible.
I mean, state-run media, NHK is going to run television special after television special, after documentary, after yet another television special about it once it opens and is operational and is just fully running. I'm sure the rest of Japanese media will follow, and you will see international media catch on, and I'm sure you're going to see a fair share of content creators on the internet, streamers. I'm sure a lot of our travel YouTubers that we see, like Travel Geek and Sukiyaki Travel, etc., they'll all want a chance to ride the Maglev Shinkansen. So it's going to be a source of a lot of content for a very long time.
Economic projections surrounding the project are impressive, to say the least. By collapsing travel times between three of the biggest metro areas in Japan, Chuo Shinkansen aims to combine the world's largest city, Tokyo, with Nagoya and Osaka to create a single massive labor and market basin. It's not unlike somehow turning New York City, Los Angeles, and Chicago into a single sprawling city, easily traversed by all residents. As the government's ultra-low interest loans indicate, this has major implications for a country that already has the third largest GDP in the world. One study estimates a positive economic impact that could be as high as 17 trillion yen in the first 50 years of operation.
I mean, it's easy to see. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to want to ride this, and it makes possible, once it's all built, it makes it very possible for someone to, say, live in Nagoya, but commute to Tokyo via this Maglev Shinkansen, and commute to Tokyo for work and then take the train home at the end of the day. Or vice versa. Someone living in Tokyo commutes to Nagoya for work, then takes the train back home to Tokyo. When distance is no longer a major factor for consideration of where you work and where you live, there's so many other options that open up to you. That's really incredible. So many more opportunities.
That's about 110.5 billion US dollars. A lot of money, no doubt. But surprisingly,
Yes.
when squared with its roughly $60 billion cost, and when compared against other large, developed world infrastructure projects, those returns are actually on the moderate side. The benefit to cost ratio is roughly 1.9 to 1. Compare that with, for example, the Three Gorges Dam in China, which has a 20 to 1 benefit to cost and is expected to generate over 600 billion US dollars long term. But while this helps put Chuo Shinkansen in perspective, it's still one of the largest projects ever undertaken in Japan. And it won't just be societally transformative, it will also earn a permanent place in the history of transportation.
Yes.
500 kilometers per hour is a landmark breakthrough.
Yeah.
One that will have the rest
It's
of the world
groundbreaking.
vying to catch
Literally.
up. It's a speed that, not so long ago, would have seemed like science fiction. According to JR Central, tickets for Chuo Shinkansen will be comparable to the cost of tickets for the standard Tokaido Shinkansen line. In addition to the throngs of business people who will use the train to increase their professional success, countless others, perhaps from all corners of the globe, will go for a ride, just to be able to say they experienced the fastest train ever
Oh,
built.
yes. Lots
Who
of
knows?
holiday goers.
Perhaps you'll be one of them. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to share your thoughts on Chuo Shinkansen in the comments section below. And please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video.
Oh,
That's all for
definitely.
now. We'll see you next time on Looking For.
Definitely leave a like. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and subscribe to Looking For. This seems like a good channel.